morning, friends, and welcome to New Garden Friends Meeting Digital Worship. I'm Margaret Webb, the pastor here at New Garden Friends Meeting, and today is June 21st. I want to open our worship, as we always do at New Garden Friends Meeting, by extending a warm welcome to all of you. You are welcome here at New Garden Friends Meeting, no matter who you are and no matter where you may be on your spiritual journey. You are welcome here among friends. New Garden Friends Meeting is a spiritual home to many and a place where we welcome and encourage your spiritual exploration and your questions, and where we laugh together and ask questions about faith together and tell each other stories about love and the movement of the divine. And it is in that spirit that I want to welcome you into this place. Welcome home to New Garden Friends Meeting. This is a home for you, and you are very welcome here. Friends, I want to encourage you to spend a few moments greeting one another, either in the comment section of this video or by sending each other text messages or Facebook messages, emails, whatever works well for you. Or you can just make a note to yourself that after meeting for worship today, you would like to send an email or a message to another New Gardener, just to remind yourself to spread that warm welcome to one another. And while you are greeting one another in that way, I'm going to go ahead and move into our announcements this morning. So my first announcement for this morning is that, as you can see, we are back to just doing Facebook Live worship this morning. And we will also record, of course, this video, and it will be available on the New Garden Friends Meeting website and also available here on our Facebook page if you can't catch it live. But next Sunday, on June 28th, we will be back to doing Zoom and Facebook Live. So this month of June, we are experimenting with different ways to do our digital worship together. So I know that it probably has now deeply confused all of you, but the way that it has worked out is we've done every other week on Zoom for the month of June. So on June 28th, you can join us on Zoom for Meeting for Worship at 11, or you can join us here on our Facebook page and watch the live stream of Zoom worship here on the Facebook page. Or you can get the recording of Meeting for Worship, which will be uploaded onto the New Garden Friends Meeting website. So there are 3 different ways you can access worship. 2 ways that are live. One way where you can be participating in worship, that would be if you join us on Zoom. And then there are 2 ways you can find it recorded after 11 o'clock worship has ended, either here on our Facebook page where the recording will be posted, or on our New Garden Friends Meeting website. And we would love to hear feedback. The Meeting on Ministry and Counsel is receiving feedback about how these worship experiences feel for you and what might best meet your needs for digital worship. So feel free to send feedback to the clerk of the Meeting on Ministry and Counsel or the clerk of the meeting, or you can join us today at 1 o'clock on Zoom when we will be discussing digital worship and also spending some time just being with one another as a community. So you should have received a link to that Zoom time for today at 1 o'clock. You should have gotten it at the end of this past week in an email that came from the office here at New Garden Friends Meeting. So now that everybody is thoroughly confused about digital worship, just to go back once more, next Sunday on June 28th, we will be back to doing worship on Zoom. You can join us on Zoom or here on New Garden Friends Meeting Facebook page. And next Sunday, we will have a guest bringing the prepared message. Bill Eagles will be bringing the prepared message and the reading during Meeting for Worship. next Sunday. So it will be wonderful. So please join us. Please join us. My next announcement is that we will have music as part of our worship today, and as has been my practice with digital worship, I will be posting a link to the video, which is on YouTube. Mark Alley, our wonderful music director here at New Garden Friends Meeting, has prepared special music for us this morning. I will post the link to that video in the comments section of this video once I end the live feed, when we are settling into our silence. So those are my announcements this morning. I have a reading to share with all of you this morning. It is from Britain Yearly Meeting, Faith and Practice, which is a guidebook of reflections on the Quaker faith and how we practice together as friends. If you're interested in learning more about Britain Yearly Meeting, Faith and Practice, you can find it in its entirety online. So you can just Google Britain Yearly Meeting, Faith and Practice, and you can find it entirely online. Today I'm reading from section 26.72. And this is a quote from Thomas Kelly, Quaker writer and thinker. And he wrote this in 1941. To you who are seekers, to you, young and old, who have toiled all night and caught nothing, but who want to launch out into the deeps and let down your nets for a draught, I want to speak as simply, as tenderly, as clearly as I can. For God can be found. There is a last rock for your souls, a resting place of absolute peace and joy and power and radiance and security. There is a divine center into which your life can slip, a new and absolute orientation in God, a center where you can live with the divine, and out of which you see all of life through a new and radiant vision, tinged with new sorrows and pangs, with new joys unspeakable and full of glory. The reality of presence has been very great at times recently. One knows at first hand what the old inquiry meant. Has truth been advancing among you? And again, that's Thomas Kelly in 1941. Friends, let's take some time to center in the silence this morning. And as we get ready to center into the silence, I'm very aware that this Sunday is Father's Day, and happy Father's Day to all of those of you who are celebrating. And this morning, as I'm centering into my silent time, I'm particularly holding in prayer the fathers who I know who are doing such a wonderful job of parenting their children, and also those who may struggle with Father's Day for any reason. Sometimes holidays can be hard and can be painful, and I am lifting up in the light today those who are joyfully celebrating this Father's Day, and also those who may be struggling this Father's Day. Friends, let us have some time for silent prayer together. Amen. Thank you, friends. When I attended Earlham College and started studying for my religion degree, I learned something about the Quaker faith that I had been practicing almost all of my life that I hadn't really known before, or something that if I did know, I hadn't really thought much about. When talking about Christian traditions, it is common to classify them based on worship experience and theological perspective. For example, churches or traditions could be classified as charismatic, evangelical, Pentecostal, Anabaptist, or emergent, to name just a few. Typically, I learned, the outside world characterizes Quakers as a contemplative and/or mystical tradition. Personally, I think Quakers are a little slippery to be categorized, since you could argue that parts of our worship experience are in some ways more charismatic or even Pentecostal, in that we speak spontaneously from the silence, and that practice fairly closely resembles the practice of giving testimony that is common in some Pentecostal traditions. Every time I say this to a group of Quakers, they react with horror. But it's still true. We're kind of slippery to categorize. We have a number of different elements to our worship experience. But still, I think that this characterization of a contemplative, mystical tradition, it's certainly accurate. And our reading for this morning from Thomas Kelly, it illustrates why this is an accurate way to characterize our tradition. The way we practice Quakerism here at New Garden Friends Meeting focuses on that experience of centering down that we hear in the reading from Thomas Kelly. That experience of finding our center. The center being that place that opens us up to our connection to the divine. That place that allows us to be connected to that living presence. Whether you understand that living presence as the living Christ or as the movements of the universe, or as both. As we gather and worship together here at New Garden, we seek as one body the experience of being centered and connected, not only to each other, but also to the world around us and to that spirit. Although every Quaker has a different way to practice this centering, for many it involves settling our bodies and steadying our breathing and focusing our hearts and our minds on that light that we carry within us and the light that surrounds us. The silence is an important part of this for us. We allow intentional space in our lives to reach that center and to practice that attentive listening to the Spirit. Our centering practice is not just about being in our bodies. It's also about a posture of attentiveness, of attentive listening. And it's hard to listen, to really listen, if there is too much noise or movement in your life. What is interesting, as Thomas Kelly suggests, is that it isn't just about what we do in complete silence, although silence is part of our practice. And it isn't about the sacred stillness that we find in our worship space. Staying connected to our center, staying centered, is something that can be done under many circumstances and in any place. Every first day, Sunday, starting on March 22nd, I have gone into our worship room here at New Garden Friends Meeting, and I have sat on the facing bench. I sit for a while, and I imagine all of you sitting on the empty benches that are all around me. And I breathe deeply in that space, and I lift our community up in the light. I pretend that I'm looking around the room, and I imagine each of you, and I send you light and hold you in the light. I often feel sad as I do this on Sundays. I miss your presence in our space that we have shared together. If you have been in our worship space here at New Garden Friends Meeting, or if you have been to the grounds even here at New Garden, you know that there is something hard to place but extraordinary about our space. Something that is still and deep. Something lovely and profound. In my experience over the last 3 months, it has become clearer and clearer to me that that thing that is so hard to characterize about our space here at New Garden Friends Meeting, it's all of you. The community that we have built here together, the love that ties us close to one another, the light that we bring to the benches and to the brick walls of our space. Although our meeting house is as lovely looking as ever these days, the magic of the place is all of you. And I guess I should have realized this sooner than just in the last 3 months, because we seek and find that living presence not just in our meeting house, but constantly throughout our lives. Of course, it is not the brick walls, the benches, and the grounds, no matter how lovely they may be. Of course, it is not that which is so sacred to us. It is our practice of centering, our holy practice of seeking and finding the divine. It is the love that we share with one another and our ties of community that bind us close together. It is our care and nurture for one another, and that is something that we take with us wherever we go. And thank goodness that we can experience that living presence outside of these walls. Because right now it feels like our world is falling apart a little bit at the seams with every day as we experience COVID-19 as a country and as a world. And I need that ability to connect with the divine now more than ever. I need that ability to slip in deeper into the center of calm and peace that grounds me, that helps me stay grounded. I need that ability to connect spiritually with our world right now, because sometimes it feels as if the ground beneath our feet is shifting and changing day by day. It is also this center that helps me stay grounded as I face the important anti-racism work that I am doing right now. As a white person, it is especially important that I keep my work up day by day and stay strong constantly in my commitment to facing my own white privilege and also working to dismantle the systems of racism that are all around us. It is a lifelong commitment, not a moment. And this work would be so much harder for me, and I would burn out so much more easily if I was not grounded in my faith and in that place of love and wholeness that is the divine mystery. Thomas Kelly says tenderly, God can be found. And that is a tender word that I need, because our meeting house is locked and our community is socially distancing from one another. Our old systems of support and love and comfort are not around us in the same way that they used to be. And that can make it so much harder to practice spiritually, because how we have always done that is different now. As I was preparing my message for all of you this morning, I kept going back to these questions. What is the good news of this moment? What are the ways that we can be seeking the center right now within this experience? How can our tradition as friends help us weather this storm? And the answer for me is that our faith is not prescriptive. Thomas Kelly doesn't say to us, God can be found by following these 3 easy steps. Instead, we start just with that pure affirmation that we can connect with the divine. And the how of how we do it is left to our creative work that we do together as a corporate body. This new world that we live in now is calling us forward into new contemplative practices and new mystical experiences. And I see that we have 2 opportunities before us. We can learn new practices to connect with the divine in our personal lives. And we can also learn new ways to connect with the divine in our corporate practices as a body. And yes, this looks like meeting for worship on Zoom or on Facebook Live or recorded on our website. This could also look like small spiritual nurture groups that meet outside. It might look like digital retreat times. It might look like intergenerational forums on racism offered through live streaming. This might look like something that I have not even thought of yet, or something incredible and creative that all of you come up with. But we rest in the certainty of our Quaker faith, that the living presence is surrounding us, and all we must do is open our hearts and minds and find new ways to interpret our practice, new ways that fit the future that is unfolding before us. We are not the same in this moment. But increasingly, I am also coming to believe that we will never be the same again. Although I believe and hope that we will be able to return to our worship space before too long passes, and I trust and hope that once we return to our space together, we will pick back up some of our beloved traditions here at New Garden Friends Meeting. I do think that the truth is that New Garden Friends Meeting will never again be quite the same. And that is scary and sad, but it is also hopeful and potentially lovely. Our faith is dynamic and adaptable as Quakers. And as I said before, the magic of New Garden Friends Meeting is all of you. As long as we have you, we will always be New Garden Friends Meeting, because the divine can be found and we will be seeking it together. We will never lose what is most precious to us about our meeting community, because that is, of course, all of you and the ties that bind you together. Our personal practices, too, can flex and change in this new reality. Silence has been a cornerstone of our practice, and some of you may find that silence is an ample supply in your lives right now, and so this is an opportunity to dive deep into this silence and to delight in this practice that has been so cherished by our Quaker forebears. And for some of you, you may find that silence is in rather short supply during this time. And so now is the opportunity to practice centering with just a little silence. A tiny sliver of silence can still help ground your breathing, and imperfect silence can still help to still your soul so that you can be attentive to that still small voice. A deep breath, a quiet pause in between tasks, spending a few minutes on the phone with a dear friend and the two of you just breathing quietly together on the phone. Sitting on the porch of a friend's house and taking a holy pause and listening for the wind and the birds. A moment of stillness as you wash dishes. A few minutes laying on the floor of your playroom as you pause from picking up all the toys that have managed to make their way to the floor during the course of your day. The divine is in those moments too. The divine is waiting tenderly to speak to your condition, waiting to gently lift you up. When I was a student at Princeton Theological Seminary, I would attend sometimes local Quaker meetings in the Princeton area. There's a Friends meeting in Princeton, New Jersey, and I would sometimes attend that meeting, and then I also sometimes would attend a meeting in New Jersey, a different part of New Jersey. But I found that a lot of times it was hard to get to one of those meeting communities. So instead, I started our own little meeting for worship that met in the married student housing at Princeton. And it was a small group of us that would gather once a week. And sometimes we would share food and a meal together. And sometimes we would just have time for centering silence and tea. But we practiced silence together in that space. And we would invite in newcomers and people who were curious about Quakerism, along with longtime friends. And it was one of the most beautiful worshiping communities that I have ever been part of It was so simple and so organic. There was nothing to it except being with people who we cared about and caring for one another and seeking together the divine presence. And that experience taught me that although there are things that we love about our faith tradition, the heart and soul of it is so simple, so dynamic, so flexible, that it can be found under almost any circumstance and in almost any place. We can stretch ourselves and find creative ways to practice our contemplative mystical tradition. And we can remember the importance of those practices. They feel so important to me right now as we all become weary of social distancing and being careful through this pandemic. We are all tired of living this way. And that is one of the reasons that these practices feel so important to me in this moment. And not just because of the pandemic, but also because of the ways that our country is changing and challenging itself to do better and to be better, to work on issues of justice and mercy, to try new things, and to confront old, terrible injustices and hatefulness in our country. Those challenges that we are facing right now require for me that I stay centered and grounded in my practice, and require that I be imaginative and creative about how I practice those things under these circumstances. Now is the time for us to be creative in our practices, for the sake of our tired hearts, for the sake of our grieving neighbors, for the sake of our precious community. Friends, hear again the affirmation of our Quaker faith. God can be found. The living presence is with us. We must simply find new ways to rest in this holy truth, to stretch our hearts and use our imaginations, and to remember that although we may not sit side by side in our benches in our worship room, we are still together in every way that counts. Our hearts are together. The love, those blessed ties that bind us together as one, are still strong. And they will remain strong today and tomorrow and for every day and year to come. And remember, friends, you are not alone. Friends, we are now entering our time of silent waiting worship this morning. I would invite you during this time of silence to recenter yourself and ground yourself in this space here today, whatever that looks like for you in your homes or wherever you are worshiping today. Friends, I am so glad that we were able to be together this morning. May the peace of the divine be with you until we are together again.